walking through a funhouse night. When we got to the door of my room, I couldn't fit my key in the lock. My key was now the size of an anvil, and the keyhole no bigger than the eye of a needle. The only saving grace that night, when we finally got into bed, was that I was finally proud of my manhood and couldn't imagine anything getting bigger. Alive almost did not come out. Casablanca had taken a bath at a record called Best Moments of the Tonight Show, a double album that consisted of highlights from Johnny Carson's talk show. Ironically enough, this record was put together by Joyce Bilas, our former co-manager, and the woman who would soon be Mrs. Newberger. Even though we were the label's Ponds act, there wasn't a whole lot of money to go around. There have always been rumors that the Alive record was substantially newer to the studio. It's not true. We did touch up the vocal parts and fix some of the guitar solos, but we didn't have the time or money to complete a rework of the recordings. What we wanted and what we got was proof of the band's rawness and power. Alive was released in September 1975 and immediately moved up the charts. Sales eventually went to 4 million. Amazingly, Alive record produced our first big single, a concert version of Rock and Roll All Night. Almost overnight, we went from being a working band with a record contract and a devoted following to being national superstars. The lasting effect of the Live album went beyond Kiss. In fact, it affected the entire rock industry. Before Alive, bands didn't really release concert albums as a legitimate product. They were almost always put out to fulfill contracts. We were one of the first bands to really care about the idea and to package it accordingly. When the album came out, it had a gatefold showing all 3 studio albums and pictures of handwritten notes from all the band members. Within 3 years, many more of these elaborate live packages appeared, including Frampton Comes Alive and Cheap Trick at the Dokkan, which included a little homage to us in a song called Surrender, with the lyric, "Rock and Rollin' got my Kiss records out." Live records became mandatory for 70 superstars, and we led the way. After the massive success of Alive, we knew that we had to deliver a grand statement. We wanted a studio record that would top all our previous efforts. To achieve that, we brought in Bob Ezrin, who was already well known as a producer for his work with Alice Cooper and would later produce Pink Floyd's The Wall. We started recording in the record plant in New York in January of '76, only 5 months after the release of Alive. Up until we met Bob Ezrin, we were leery of letting anybody else have a say as to what we should record. That included management, record companies, producers, anybody. Bob Ezrin was the first and continues to be the only producer who ever really had an effect on the band. It's hard to say why we let Bob have so much control, but it's also easy. It wasn't about his track record. It's never about a track record. It's more about the fact that when somebody has an idea and can communicate that idea as effectively as Bob, they automatically command a certain respect. Other bands have stories about meeting with producers who teach them how to be professionals. Before these producers came along, they were noble savages, beating on their guitars and just hoping for the best. It wasn't like that with Kiss. We had known what we were doing since the beginning. Bob didn't make us go faster. In fact, if anything, he slowed the process down considerably. But it was the way he slowed it down that was impressive. At one point, I remember him stopping us in the middle of a rehearsal. "Okay," he said, "you guys know how to tune your instruments?" We were all self-taught musicians, we said. "Of course, here's how you tune them." He frowned. "No," he said. "There's another way to tune instruments, which is pitch perfect. It's called harmonic tuning." And he showed us how to do it, which we had never seen in our lives. It was like going back to school or to summer camp. He carried a whistle around, and whenever he wanted to get our attention, he would say, "Campers?" Every time we thought we had done enough to satisfy him, he would come at us with something else. In some ways, he was quite a disciplinarian. When he didn't think we were getting a handle on something, he would send us outside the studio. Paul and I were excited because we knew the experience was making the band better. We were rubbing our hands together thinking, "Oh boy, this is going to a place we haven't been." It was a really good adventure because we recognized that whatever we were doing, even though it was a step forward, it still sounded like Kiss, but better than before. We literally heard the record coming together there in the studio, and it was the best version of the band to that point. Much of the success of Destroyer had to do with Bob's bravery, particularly his interest in introducing new elements into our music. Bob's children would come in. He was going through a divorce at the time, and they actually wound up as the little voices in God of Thunder. He was doing all kinds of things, like having symphony orchestras and choirs. What George Martin was to the Beatles, Bob Ezrin was to us. He had something that we had never seen before in a producer, vision. He knew where he was going within the confines of what Kiss was, and most important, he knew how to get there. While Paul and I had perspective and vision, we didn't quite know how to get there, because we were limited as musicians. There was one thing we did know though. We wanted to create an experience that went beyond the experiences that other rock bands were creating. Bob really listened to our songs and recognized that we were less about storytelling than about singing about our own feelings and perceptions. Like the king of the nighttime world, I want to rock and roll all night. That was a quantum difference.